introduce yourselves so we all know each other. We can start that way. We all have our list somewhere of who's on the committee, but would you like to start, Mr. Hurd?
Jim Hurd.
John French.
Mark Haskell. Dick Householder.
Lorna Cummings, Wendy Rich,
Sophie Romano.
Mary Winchell,
Courtney Seaforth,
Shannon Heron,
Carla Dorimas Trampio.
Lisa Dresser.
Sandy Cox.
Tyler Smith.
Mark Corsi. Mark Siegenthaler.
Jody Hansen,
Audrey Kaler Bell.
And behind us, we have the select board. I don't know if everybody knows the select board, but maybe you would like to introduce yourselves as well.
Sure, thanks, Robin. Taylor Benzie.
Allison McKellar,
Bob Falciani.
Mark Ratner. And then we have two people over there.
Thank you.
Jeremy Martin, I'm Planning and Development Director for the town of Camden.
Carrie Leishman, the secretary.
Thank you. Which reminds you, we didn't have name plates. Are we going to get?
We can print out
Yeah.
nameplates for next week.
Okay. A few things to go through before we get started for the meeting. I understand some of you were here for last week. I was not. It was a small meeting, I believe. So there are a couple of things that we need to go over regarding ground rules for the budget committee. We use Robert's Rules of Orders to consider issues and take votes as we go through. The quorum, we will have, as 13 people we need to have a quorum. If you're not going to be here, if you could please let Janice or Audra know so we can have a little advance notice if we're going to have issues with quorum. To take an action, there must be a motion, a second, and a vote. And the vote must have a majority of those present to pass. In order to reconsider an item, once we've passed it, someone must make a motion to reconsider. And the motion must be seconded, and it must pass in order to be reconsidered and discussed. So we have to have the motion to reconsider before we actually get into the discussion. We can't keep revisiting items, and if you read Audrey's letter, we should be kind of looking at the big picture and what we're doing. But we can't keep reconsidering everything. If we need to reconsider something a second time or a third time, an item has already been reconsidered previously, it cannot be reconsidered again unless someone from the winning side makes a motion to reconsider, and then it must pass by 2/3 vote. Town manager and department heads will be doing the presentation for the budgets for the departments. There's an open question period. The town manager or department heads may field questions during the departmental budget session, so if you have questions, you can ask them to clarify while they're discussing it. After the presentation, we'll open the floor to any questions that you would have for discussion beyond that. Approval of department budgets. Once all questions have been answered, either a committee member will make a motion or the chair will call for a motion to be made. Once the motion has been approved, the committee will move on to the next department budget for consideration. There's a few other things that we need to decide as a group. One, or just a few announcements. One, the select board is here, as you see. They join us for this process to hear what our discussions and deliberations are so that they can have that information when they get to their budget section after we're done. Public comments. We need to decide if we want to accept public comments during our meetings. And so we can handle that a couple of ways. We can do that as questions come up. Or, as in a lot of meetings, we can do it where anybody can come in the beginning if they have an interest of something that's going to be done on the agenda that night. We can give them a limited time of 2 minutes to stand up, say what they have to say, and then we move into the meeting, so it's not interrupting the meeting as we move forward. So I don't know if anybody wants to discuss that or make a motion or how we would like to move forward with that for public comments.
What has been done in the past?
I'm trying to remember what we did in the past.
I can't remember either.
There haven't honestly been a whole lot of public
Handle it
comments
as
from what
needed.
I've seen.
As it happens, handle it.
Yeah, if somebody comes in, we can just vote on it then.
Is everybody comfortable with that? Does anybody want to make a motion?
But I have a question. Are you proposing that someone comes in at any time, no matter where we are in the discussion, and they just insert their question? Even if it's irrelevant? I'm just wondering if it would be better to say that at the beginning, let us say, like, the first 15 minutes of the meeting is open for public comment.
Yes.
And then we can just.
But then I don't know what the question is until they
Well,
get
they
into
have an
discussion.
agenda, but they have an
Yeah, but-
agenda. They have to comment on what, they would have to comment on what's
But
going
a lot of
to
times
be on the
questions come
agenda.
up from discussion.
That's correct.
You could have a non-agenda item section.
We don't, I don't think we have to worry about it anyway, because we have never, I don't recall the last time we had public comment.
Okay, so we can hold off on that and see if we have an issue with that, and then we can move on from there. There has, the other question is for the chair voting, if you want to have the chair able to vote during regular votes or just be a tiebreaker. And we have in the past done it where the chair was able to vote during votes, but that is a question to ask of you as well.
I think
If
that's
anybody
always
has
up
any
to the chair to
objections.
decide which they want to do.
Okay. Any objections to me voting along with the rest of you? Is that
I'll
okay?
move the chair votes with
Okay.
everyone.
I second.
Everybody in favor? Thank you. Okay. Also, freedom of access laws within the state of Maine, one of the things we need to be careful of is no deliberations over email. So for instance, if Audra or Janice sends out information to us, don't reply all and start a conversation, or if somebody replies all, don't start a conversation and reset, because then it's considered a meeting and we can't do that outside of this facility right now. So I think that was all the things that we have. Did everybody get a copy of this evening's agenda from Janice as you came in? And it tells you the pages, yeah?
I do have a question,
Yeah.
if I may. My understanding also is that those meetings are recorded and streamed live. And my understanding is that for purpose of clarity and transparency, we're only going to have one conversation at a time and no side conversation in the meeting?
Correct, that would be great. Yeah, if somebody is talking, please don't interrupt. It's one conversation at a time, as you said, yes.
Okay,
And
thank you.
that's part of just being Robert's rules and keeping things going.
I'm not familiar with Robert's
Yep,
rule, that's why
okay.
I'm asking again.
Okay?
All right, so before we get started, we're going to be going over 5 different departmental budgets tonight: the administration budget, planning codes and assessing, insurances, information technology, and professional services. So before we get into discussing the specific budgets, did anybody have a question or anything that they'd like me to follow up on from last week?
Could you just clarify again, what is the surplus?
Absolutely. So we kind of use the term surplus and unassigned fund balance interchangeably. And basically, that's just all the money that sits in the town accounts that isn't dedicated to a specific purpose. So it's very different than, for instance, reserve funds that have been set aside for very specific reasons.
And what is the current surplus? I'm just pulling that up right now as we speak.
We just got the audit report back, so we know we can answer that question with as much accuracy as we're ever able to
Yes.
answer it with.
I have it on paper, actually. June 30, 2019 is the most recent audit. And right now, we have a draft total of 4.7 million in unassigned fund balance.
And so there's just to add a little bit to that, there's a select board policy that the town will have 16.9%, 16.7%, which is the equivalent of 2 months' worth of expenses on hand in the surplus. And with that $4.7 million balance, we're well into the 20s.
Okay, thank you. That was sort of my follow-up question on this.
So would you tell us what the 12% is, just so everybody knows what the
The 16.7?
16.7?
It's about 1.6 million.
Let's get 3 million over the policy?
But just keep in mind, this was as of June 30, 2019. We did utilize about 985,000 for FY '20 out of the unassigned fund balance, so you'll want to subtract that from the 4.6.
So that 4.7 is as of last June.
As of June 30, yep.
Okay, so right now it's almost $1 million less than that.
Correct.
Correct,
But it's
okay.
also picked up.
We have probably picked up.
And we didn't really use that 900,000. I
No.
think when all's said and done, it'll be more like 700 that we end up using. Because one of the projects came in under budget. So any other questions?
Did you give out the revenue report? I didn't see it in my binder.
There should be, was it green this year?
It's in the tabs under, it should be under the revenue tab. Oh, I see it right here. Green was the winning answer. Thank you.
Did you mention what affects, what equals for upping the mill rate at the last meeting, what the mill rate is?
We did talk about that. So let me just bring that up so everybody has it in mind. So the current mill rate is 14.91, and the current valuation is 1.3 billion. So that the valuation is important because it's as of the last assessment, or sorry, the last commitment. That's, that's significant because we went through this last week, but reducing the tax rate by a cent, that's like $13,200, or increasing revenue by that amount. 10 cents is 132,000 decrease or increasing revenues by that much. And, reducing the tax rate by $1, it's cutting spending by 1.32 million or increasing revenues by 1.32 million. So it's just, good to have that sort of in mind as you go through everything. All right, so is everybody ready to get into the specific departments?
Just one last question.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Are we going to hear from the school budget during this process at all, or?
Well, they invited the budget committee as well as the select board to they have an April 30th meeting where they present their budget. So it would be a little outside of our normal process, but they have.
They will be here.
Oh, they are going to come here? Oh, okay.
Oh, good, thank you.
Anything further? All right, so the first area that we'll be looking at is the administrative budget, administration and finance. And so this is where all of the operations around the front office, when you come in and you pay your property tax bill or you register your dog, where Jody does her work, Janice and I, all of those operations sit in this part of the budget. And really the most sort of notable change from last year to this year has to do with the wages, and a lot of that is the factors that we talked about last week. So, step and grade changes. There were a couple of employees who we readjusted their labor grades because their positions changed, and we needed to reflect that in their wages. So that's kind of a significant change. Another one, more money for elections, and that's accounting for the fact that we've got a presidential election in November, and so that's, more intensive and increase the budget in order to do a lot of the work associated with that. Other than that, most of the other areas in the budget are pretty consistent with what is going on last year.
Line 1520 communications seems like, so that's 1485 to 10,000, is that right?
So yes, that was with the new phone system, and I think we just changed where that was from IT to that area. So the new phone system was put in was it last financial year or the financial year before that? FY.
I think it was FY
18, yeah.
So is that a maintenance fee?
That is the hosting fee because it's a cloud-based phone system. So, yeah, it's not, there's not like a piece of hardware that sits in the town office that operates the phone. It's all in the cloud.
The mileage stipend is just a set value. So you must assume some sort of,
Yeah, it's set to the federal rate.
it's not, I mean, I see it's it's like, it's a stipend. It's not actually based on mileage.
Yeah, that is actually for Audra, written into her contract.
yes.
Oh, okay.
And then
Yeah.
down below, line 18, actually, so, I'm sorry, I'm looking at a computer, I'm sorry. Down below, dues and publications, halfway down the page, mileage is for staff travel.
Thank you.
So is that 10,000 just for this building? For the phone service?
Phones in this
So
building.
every building has its own $10,000,
No, not everyone's on the cloud-based phone system.
so the public safety bill does not,
They are not.
and that's it, right?
Yes. Yeah. Their needs are a lot less complicated.
Any other questions? John?
Oh. No, what do you do with credit card fees? Just figure they're gonna pay for it as they use them, and that, so there's no offsetting?
Are you looking down at the credit card fees line?
Yes.
Yeah, that was, I hate to keep saying this was prior to my arrival. This was when they assumed that the town was going to have to cover some sort of fee for the credit cards. When we accept credit cards
I
in the
know.
town office, it is, the fee is passed on to the customers.
It's
There's
still
no
two-
cost to the town.
2.5%?
Yep. So that's their fee that they collect on any credit card transaction, so it does not cost the town anything.
That 2.5 will have to be cash or check, right? Because you're not doing a double charge on the credit card, are you?
Say that again?
So if somebody comes in with a credit card and pays their taxes.
Yep.
So the 2.5%,
Goes to the vendor.
right.
Yep.
So is that added to the bill, to the,
No.
no? So they pay a separate,
Correct. We don't even see that, that goes directly to the state. It's a state-based
okay.
credit card processing firm.
How does the person know that they're paying that extra percentage?
They are notified every time they use their credit card, and it's on the statement that they sign.
Okay.
I have a question on what does the election budget covers, and the printing for the election is under that line, and I'm assuming the printing is just printed materials for town regular business?
Yeah, printing ballots.
The printing ballots is under the election line, not under printing.
Yeah, we have to pay the deputy wardens, other, poll workers. Sometimes there's, work that needs to be done to the voting machines, programming, that sort of thing. And there are other supplies just associated with the,
Do we own the voting machines? Do we lease them? Do we rent them?
believe we own
I
them.
think we own it, but we pay every year for programming as it pertains to what is coming down the pike for any type of election.
Thank you.
And a question about, we just had a primary election, and in essence, it's a private party election where a number of our citizens are not allowed to vote because they're not a member of one of the parties. Do the parties reimburse us for any of that, or are we picking up the tab for them?
We are not reimbursed by the parties.
Okay. Could we bill them?
We could
Should we
try.
bill them?
We could try.
I suggest we send them a bill.
Okay, any other questions?
I'd love to see you do it.
Do you have a motion?
I make a motion that Mark send a bill to the,
I'll second it.
Do we have a motion on the budget?
I move that we accept the budget as presented.
What, 832?
I'm sorry, $832,800 for fiscal year '21.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor? Anyone opposed?
All right, so the next budget we'll be looking at are professional services. Now, these are for all of sort of the outside services that we typically contract for, so it includes legal fees, it includes the outside engineering, and this is probably the area in the budget where you'll see the most variation between last year and this year, and that all has to do with the way that we're now funding legal services. So it used to be that we had sort of a pretty typical arrangement with our attorney, so still the same attorney, Bill Kelly from Kelly and Associates, and Bill would bill the town on an hourly basis for his services, which is, you know, a pretty typical arrangement between a municipality and their legal counsel. And, you know, it's difficult with that sort of arrangement to have a lot of predictability from year to year, because you do your best at any point in time to estimate what your legal fees are going to be for the year, but something could happen that, you know, creates a spike in, you know, what you need to access legal services for. Other years, you know, it can be very kind of predictable, and it's the same business as usual, you know, type work that you have your legal counsel working on. So, you know, one thing that the select board discussed was sharing the attorney with the city of Belfast, where he would come on as like a full-time employee, and then we'd be reimbursed by the city of Belfast. So that's kind of the agreement that we're under right now. Bill is a full-time employee of the town of Camden, and then the city of Belfast reimburses us 66.66% of all of Bill's expenses or salary benefits. So that's why you see the extremely large change from last financial, or the current financial year we're in now, to this year. However, if you go and look on the revenue side, there's a corresponding revenue offsetting that from the city, or offsetting a portion of that from the city of Belfast. So that's really the single largest change. Apart from, you know, legal services, everything else is holding pretty consistent with last year.
So what is this, well, I guess it'd be 34% of $163,800 would be our responsibility?
Yes.
So what does that represent?
You're going to ask that, and I'd have to do quick math in my head.
It's actually not the 163,800. I think it includes the benefits as well.
Yeah.
So it's 50, for his wage only, it would be $55,692.
And then health costs?
Yep, 33.
And all the rest of the benefits?
I think it's 72.
Generally about 40%, isn't it? 40% of the salary represents the benefits?
Yeah, that's all the FICA, retirement, health insurance.
Total would be 82,000.
82, not 72.
So our share is 82?
82, yes.
And I'm looking at the legal for what you have presented here, and it's been 20,000 for the last, right around for the last 3 or 4 years, except for 17, which was 63. Where's the savings?
Well, I'm not ever saying there's savings. I'm saying there's predictability from year to year.
So our predictability is $60,000, $50,000?
82.
Yeah, I know, but the difference between the salaries, I mean, of the last 3 years, 4 years.
82 versus 22.
22, 19, 16, 32.
Right.
I mean, I realize he hasn't been coming to a lot of meetings because I don't see him. He has a flat rate fee in his contract for meetings and whatever else, plus it has a hourly wage in his contract. So what is the total legal fees for the town for last year? Not just, this is not representing all of it.
Right, Bill had a really good, I said the same thing, and Bill wrote an email basically showing that he had billed the town for a lot more than what we were seeing, because to me also it looked like a much too big of an increase to be worth it, but.
We had that spreadsheet, I think it was in the order of $54,000.
Yeah.
So that would have been nice to see, to be able to compare what we're paying for and what, you know.
The difficulty,
Bottom line.
yeah, and the
It's-
difficulty is we didn't always spend we would spend in the past all of the legal money, and then if we needed to continue funding legal services, we would go into like the select board contingency or other areas of the budget. So sometimes it's hard to track back and just showing from the budget what you're seeing here presented exactly what we paid in legal services.
But traditionally, it's always, the planning board is usually one of the biggest hits for the legal fees. And also, if there's a reval going on, he gets involved a lot of times, well, before, I don't know about now, but when it was, the way it was before. Okay.
So according to this, the actual fiscal year 17, it was 97,000. In 18, it was 54,8. In 19, it was 53,7.
With all the rest added
Yeah,
in.
Where were you
but then
getting
that
those
doesn't
from?
account for, there were
Where
other,
are you getting those from, Mark?
From, right on the sheet there.
The totals per year.
Does roll up engineering services in a couple.
Page 3.
Yeah, but that's a total of several categories,
Right, but he's covering all those categories.
not the engineering and professional, legal, just the legal lines, so it should be,
Well, the 82,000 comes from the bottom figure there, the 248,950.
well, 49 of that was engineering, which would be like Gartley and Dorsey, right, or somebody like that, correct?
yes.
Not,
yeah.
not.
But I guess my point is, these actuals don't necessarily reflect the full amount of legal that we spent in any one given year, because they're just reflecting what we spent in these particular lines. If we spent more than that, often in the past, the select board would vote out of like the contingency or other areas to cover legal expenses. So.
Not a question, I just like to know.
Yeah, well, I guess my point is, if you want to know, like, true picture of what we spent on legal services over like a 10-year period, we'd have to pull Bill's invoices, and the select board
I'm
got
trying to
to.
find the email. He did that because he objected strongly to what we were.
I've got it. So he gave us the last 3 years for 2000.
Nobody's going to be able to hear on the live stream. Can somebody just pass the microphone to them?
Oh.
So for the last, Bill noted that he's been with us for, I want to say 16 years, and there have been more than 1 year where the billings did exceed $100,000. So for 2019, billing was a total of $38,000 from William Kelly. In 2018, it was about $40,000, and then $69,000 in 2017. So it averaged for those 3 years about just under $50,000.
So now we've gone to 82,000. From an averaging of 50,000 a year, we've gone to 82,000.
So, and I'd also, like, it's not just the cost itself, it's also, it's just a different level of service that we're getting from Bill than what we got before. So, before it was very reactive, we had an issue and we went to Bill. Now, because he's here on a sort of more regular basis, it can be much more proactive. So there's a lot of, things that normally it wouldn't come to him until we actually have a legal issue. Now we can go to Bill ahead of time and prevent a lot of things.
Is there an hourly, is there a maximum built into this contract as to once he gets reached to a certain number of hours, he will get to bill more?
No. Yes.
Oh, I had a question. The figures that Taylor was giving, those were the total legals?
Yeah, so that was, Bill's basing that on the 1099s that he did, that he actually billed to
All right,
us.
so the difference is he now going to be able to get the health insurance, the main PERS and all that? That's probably why he would like,
Yes.
Anybody in his position would love to get. But that's something
Yes.
he was picking up before, right?
Correct.
Or building into his salary.
Yes.
But now we're picking up, where's his health insurance?
Yes.
As well as his retirement system.
Yep, so that's all under the FICA, Medicare, ICMA, and PERS. That's all the attorney.
What is the total? It's health insurance plus what things would we have not been covering before?
So
The health insurance, the main PERS, and the Medicare?
Yeah, FICA, Medicare,
All of
ICMA,
those.
health insurance. Yep, those are the three.
Okay, I'm looking at Medicare and other stuff here, health insurance. Is Belfast picking up the 66% of that?
Yes, 66% of the total cost of bills, wages, and benefits.
I had a question. Why is there a difference between the department head amount and the town manager amount?
I think that was just,
That was, we applied a COLA to that.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, Audra, I'm curious, so was there a big switch that you needed him more, that you decided to bring him on full-time, or what was kind of your reasoning behind this?
Well, a lot of it was generated by Bill and kind of noticing his level of engagement and some of the challenges that we had with kind of levels of service and having him proactively involved. So that's kind of the impetus behind that.
So it wasn't something particular that you saw that you needed, or
I think it was the more general realization that there were some things that we weren't able to be as proactive on because, Bill didn't get involved until very late in a project or, an issue that had come up.
yeah, I mean, I've seen it firsthand, and I agree with you. It seems well worth it, but I wasn't sure there's other stuff that you were.
Yeah, I think there was no specific issue where something really bad happened and we all needed to readjust. It was more of a generalized feeling that our attorney was very disconnected from a lot of the kind of day-to-day issues that were popping up. Jeremy has a lot going on with planning and development right now, and with a lot of those type of projects, if you're not kind of involved from the very beginning, it can be very difficult to get people up to speed further along, especially your attorney as issues pop up. And so that's one of the things that we're hoping to improve.
So you're making it more efficient for all of us, right? I mean,
Well, that's the hope, and that we can save the town exposure, like risks of exposure or other things that could end up as an unforeseen expense to us.
What is your agreement with Belfast, and how long does that last? And are you gonna, look at it to see if it's working for both of you guys?
Yep. So it's a year-long interlocal agreement, and it specifies the 66.6% reimbursement that they provide the town of Camden, and sort of like a breakdown of roughly, how often Bill's going to be here versus Belfast. But that's proven to be very loose, and we've seen Bill more than what was originally spelled out in the agreement.
Do we have enough work for 2/3 of his time?
Yeah. Yes, we do.
They're 1/3 of his time.
Sorry, yeah,
1/3, sorry.
I have 2 lines here. The engineering professional, is that part of Bill's?
It is not, no.
It's not, okay. And then the bond counsel?
Yeah, so bond counsel, that's a very specialized area. That's, when we actually take out a bond with like the bond bank and, set up that financing, we need to have that all approved.
Do we have to pay the bond council? That's not part of MMA?
No, it is not.
Really?
So that's not part of Bill's?
It is not.
So to correct what I said earlier, I was looking at the total figure of that column for the 33%. The actual would be, I just figured it's like 54,000.
Yeah. That sounds quite more correct.
Yeah.
There's a question
That
down here.
includes the FICA IC and health insurance.
No, that's just the salary.
Yeah,
That was
so
the
if you-
163.
Yeah, if you add up his full-time wages, FICA Medicare, main PERS, and health insurance, and then 33.33% of that is $73,600. It's the town's responsibility.
Okay, question down here.
Yes, I did. What's the head count under the full-time wages? How many people are we covering in the professional services as full-time FTEs? Full-time employees?
Just one, just the
Just one?
attorney, yes.
33% of it.
Yeah. Want to see something else down there? Mark?
Okay, 2 questions or an answer maybe. At the top of the list where it says FY21 department head and FY21 town manager, those are the recommendations that from the department head and then the town manager. That's why those numbers are different. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Now, question, other than that, there are times when we've had to bring in someone for legal answers because the town attorney had a conflict of interest. Is there any budgeting in here for bringing in a outside attorney for an issue?
There, aside from the bond counsel, there is not.
Okay. Now, is that what, would that be covered by that line bond counsel?
No.
Select board contingency.
Contingency.
So that would strictly be brought up as an as-needed basis and would have to come out of a contingency fund?
Correct.
Okay.
Carla?
Does your contract with Bill allow, or your employment agreement allow him to have outside legal work? And if so, do you have a non-compete or non-conflict clause with him?
Yes. Yes, he can have outside employment.
Wow, that seems pretty loose.
In regards to that question, is he still representing Liberty and Searsmont and all those other towns as well, or is it just down to the?
I think it's just Belfast and Camden for municipalities.
Okay.
Not hope anymore?
I'm not
That's a
certain. I
great
don't,
question. I think that when
Yeah.
it was proposed, he said he was stopping the other towns.
Yeah.
I believe that, Steve did.
I think the only clients that he's kept are like, it's in, not
I
Castile.
know he was on the Liberty, he was their town attorney as well.
Yeah, I think he's stopped most of the municipal work except for the two of us. And then the others, it's like a housing group somewhere in another part of Maine.
Yes.
Just, I don't know anything about the health insurance for employees, like his health insurance plan is $28,000?
Yes.
Is that a family plan?
Yes,
And is that typically what we offer all of our employees?
it is. Mhm. There's a number of different choices of plans.
So he's not getting anything any different than, say, a clerk who works in the front office?
Not at all, no.
Sorry, last question. So how many hours a week are we expecting him, because we have a full-time contract agreement with him, how many hours a week are we expecting him to be available for the town?
So he is actually physically here in the building for one full day a week, but he comes to meetings and he's available on an as-needed basis on top of that as well.
And he can still have other clients, other activities, despite being a full-time employee?
Yes.
John, did you have something
I just
else?
question, Audra, why is there $10,000 difference between the your and department head?
It was because of the COLA, and also if you look under the engineering and professional services,
Oh, just the top line, the wages.
oh, yeah, that was because of the COLA.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so he'll only be here one day? Mm-hmm. He was here one day before.
If he's physically here, no, he was not.
Used to be, every Monday he used to be here. And
Since I've been here, he
no,
hasn't
not
been.
since you've been here, but
Yeah.
before.
Yes.
And he was in that little office in there.
Yeah.
Is he still in that little office?
He is.
There are some days he's here 2 days, right?
That's true.
So how did you figure your COLA? Because he didn't have, like, he wasn't here last year. So you didn't
It was
have,
just
like,
sort of
base-
across the board 3%.
But he didn't have anything last year,
What's that?
right?
No. Sorry.
Didn't have anything last year.
Yeah, that's true.
So next year,
Well,
we're
it's
doing
based-
COLA, it's another 10 grand?
It's based on the contract that we are currently following, so right now, it's the 3% is applied to what he's being paid right now.
Okay.
So, because he is currently.
It's just a matter of contracts lining up with
Right.
fiscal years.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Did you say that he also gets paid a flat rate whenever he also comes to meetings? That's
No.
not included?
No,
So
that's all
included?
Yes, yeah.
That was what was happening previously.
Yeah, so he would bill on an hourly basis for whenever he did work for the town.
And might not have been captured in the actuals for previous years.
So the rate, really, he's quoting at $130 an hour, which is pretty low for a lawyer.
Yes, yeah, and that's kind of why,
Right?
that's how he could make it work for us and
You mean
him.
benefits, including
Because
the
he has
benefits? Benefits
He
are
has
paid.
benefits, he has benefits, and
So
he would pay much more if he was billing as an independent contractor at that rate, plus paying benefits, that would be way different, but his benefits are included.
So do the math then, right? So how much is the benefits? 28,000?
28, 15, and 11.
28, 30, 40, 50?
Well, FICA is legal, so we can pay it anyway.
57.
Yeah, but he'd have to pay.
He'd have to pay his self-employed part.
And self-employed.
So what are we saying, 16 plus 28?
Plus he gets to buy into the Maine State retirement system, right, this way? I mean, he gets into the Maine State
What's the
retirement.
agreement if you get into a court battle? That all fall under this?
All falls under it.
Okay. But in some cases, the insurance company lawyers take over.
Is he still under?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's why he made the point about the some years it being over $100,000, that the last 3 years have been what Taylor said, but that there were those other times where it
Well,
was.
there was a couple, it was probably 18 was quite high. Was it 18? Or 17? 17, but there was a lot went on.
17 was 69,000.
But what was it, he said there have been times when it went over 100,000?
He said, so he's been in 16 years, he mentioned that in more than 1 year, not more specific than that, it exceeded 100,000.
Yes, because he did a lot with the statements. We had some that went to the state level. You remember that? Well, you were for that. But he had to defend the town for that.
Let's try to remember every time the towns need to be defended. And
He's got a good record as far as defending the town. I don't think he's lost one yet.
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the town manager's recommendation of 248,950.
Second. Seconded? All in favor? Opposed?
Just because. One of them.
That gets put in the town report.
Propose and development.
All right, so the planning, code enforcement, community development and assessing. So this department is pretty much all the back office functions. So it's Jeremy and his staff, code enforcement officer Steve Wilson, Carrie, and Caitlin. Their areas are all included in this budget. So, really, yes, Jeannie's another staff member back there, is very important to the team there. So really, I guess the significant changes between this year and last year, aside from, all that we've discussed in terms of wages, it would really be, we're reducing the marketing budget, and that in the past was just for, any activities to sort of promote the town. We'd work with like the downtown business group or, others for tourism or whatever the case may be. Also, the organizational dues, that's significantly decreased from about $7,000 to $1,500, and a lot of that is thanks to the county. They're going to, on a countywide basis, fund the Midcoast Economic Development District. Before, it was the individual towns who wanted to be members had to pay membership dues, and so that was close to, I think it was about $6,500 for the town of Camden. But now the county is paying for everyone, so we're covered by that level of membership. And then the other areas, and this is more of a reconfiguration than a major change, instead of funding the individual committees, so the Conservation Commission, ZBA, Historic Resources, we're going to have a line for committee projects. And the idea is that, if a committee has something they would like to do, they'll write up, like a very simple proposal, and they'll go to the select board for it to get approved for funding. So the idea is just to, make it equal amongst all committees, not just give a budget for specific committees, and also give them the opportunity to, to pitch a little project or an idea that they might need some funding for. Another thing, a line for summer internship. So in the past, we kind of did this on a more informal basis, but it's been really beneficial to the town to have an intern. We had one last year who did a lot of water quality testing, and she did boater education around, pump out boat in the harbor, trying to just look at water quality issues in general. And she did a lot of great work. We had an intern the year before that who focused on, the emerald ash borer and surveying all the ash trees in town and trying to come up with a preparedness plan, which was great. We're the first, town in Maine to do that and have something ready for when that happens. And, as a result of that, we started setting aside funds to be able to address that problem eventually. So, it's just been very inexpensive and very valuable. This year, a student from Bowdoin College approached us about, doing an internship over the summer, and Bowdoin would cover a portion of the cost of that internship. So we're still hopeful that we were able to get that intern. However, if it doesn't work out with Bowdoin, that would provide enough budget to cover the cost of an intern coming in to do some work for the town. So really, those are kind of the more significant changes.
Yes, John?
I'm gonna wear it out, ain't I? Just curious, where are we with Carrie as far as and is it Caitlin involved with the amounts? Because it doesn't say, it just says a shared amount. I didn't see how much each town is contributing.
So the way that it works is the assessor's contract, that covers off on Carrie, where you see that 72,000.
Okay, and we pay what? And Camden and Rockport pays?
We pay 72.
72, and then, okay.
And we pay that to the town of Rockport. So it's kind of like he's an employee of the town of Rockport, and then we reimburse him reimburse Rockport 72,000.
Okay.
And then for Caitlin's position, she's an employee of the town of Camden, so she's included under the full-time wages and the benefits line. And then if you look on the revenue side, you'll see Rockport assessor reimbursement, and I believe it's $11,000.
Close to that, it might be a little more this year.
And that's what Rockport pays the town of Camden for Caitlin's services. Is it 18 this year?
18,000.
Thank you.
18, yep.
18,000. So yeah, that's how that arrangement works. It's swapping money and staff.
Well, it didn't say it, just why, so I already.
Oh, I'm glad you asked the question, so I was able to explain that.
There's 4 employees, they're full-time? Is that what you're saying? That's the all shared thing you were just talking about?
So yeah, I'll go through them. There's Jeannie, who's the administrative assistant for the department, Jeremy, the planning and development director, Steve Wilson, the code enforcement officer, Caitlin, the deputy assessor, and then Carrie's a contract employee who is technically the town of Rockport's employee, but we reimburse them for his time, by 60% of his time. 50%?
Yeah,
50%.
And Jeannie's 30 hours, not 40 hours.
Yeah.
And then I had a follow-up. On the health insurance with them, it says that ones hired after '07 pay a portion of their health insurance. What percentage? I'm just thinking, when I think about the school budget, I know that we pay a certain percent. What percent?
So if anyone hired after 2007, the town pays 100% of their insurance and then 80% of any dependents or spouse.
And that's true across the board for every employee?
Yeah, if they were hired after 2007. Before 2007, it's 100%.
Yeah, we offer 3 plans, and depending on the plan, the town contributes up to 80%.
Okay.
About the intern, I'm a little confused about what year it is, because it sounded like you're talking about paying for someone for this year.
Yes.
But it's a 21 budget, so.
Yeah, so it is a bit awkward because it's in the summer. So, when the financial year clicks over, it's July 1st. So, yeah, it's one of those things where it can be a little bit split between financial years.
Yes.
It's interesting when I look at the revenue side of things, we're about flat here, and then we've about doubled over that same time period with regard to expenses. Is there a plan to have those, ideally they should have similar growth, right?
Ideally.
That would be.
I guess the question is, are we charging enough for permits to offset expenses associated with that? Or do we need to be looking at?
Last year we looked at building permit fees. The fees are supposed to cover the the cost of what we're permitting, and they generally do that. I know Steve is looking at right now. We're running into situations where contractors call for an inspection, our inspector goes out, and the contractors aren't ready, and then that means Steve has gone out there, and then he has to come back. And then they call back a couple days later and they say, now we're ready. So Steve is looking at a way to, like a reinspection fee. I know he is looking at doing something like that. Plumbers do that a lot, I will say. I mean, it's every week. He's got certain plumbers that call, say they're ready, and they're not. So we are looking at
It
that.
sounds like you try to at least balance that aspect.
We do,
Yep.
absolutely. Yep.
Anything else? Yes,
Can you do a quick recap on what's behind the wage increases from 19, 20, and 21?
Yes, so there's a combination of factors. So there's a 3% cost of living adjustment, and then there are step and grade increases as appropriate. So it depends on, milestone years of service and whatnot. And I guess in the planning codes and assessing department, oh, and another important factor that if you weren't here last week, you wouldn't have heard about. This year, we just happen to have a 53rd pay period, and because of that, it's if you add all of the wages, that's going to equate to a $58,000 increase across the board. So that's kind of all the factors that are contributing to wage increases. And Jody did a handout.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Because I think Sophie asked this question last week, which I thought was a great question.
Yeah.
So this has, a breakdown of all the departments and the change between the current financial year we're in and this budget. And it gives the dollar amount and the percentage change for each. And it shows what that change is with the 53rd pay period included, as well as what it would be if we didn't have that additional pay period.
So the next year after this, we're not going to look at the 53-week period.
Correct. Yeah, this is like an anomaly that happens every 7 years or so.
Which I never agreed with.
Much better type size.
I had you in mind, Mark.
Okay, any other questions on Codes Carla? Yeah.
In the marketing budget, how is that money requested? Who's allowed to request it, and what projects is it available for?
So really, it's been so informal over the past few years. I'm trying to think of even what we've spent it on since I've been here.
Didn't we take some of that for
Yes, that's what we've spent it on over the past few years.
you and I have been here, I think that's what.
Yeah, it was the development of the new town website is what we used to pay that for.
But it used to be used for some of those things where you try to get Camden on lists of top 10 towns to visit in the, winter, or
like an ad in Main Biz or whatever the case may be.
Right, and some people agree with it and some people didn't.
Was some of it used for the tannery at one time when they were doing the job thing? I think so.
Because I still get calls about that.
Effective every week.
Yeah.
Every week still.
Seriously?
You can land away?
Really?
Yes.
Right then.
So that was an effective advertising.
Must have been. It's still out there.
I hope you talk it up and.
We got a third out there we can put a commercial building on.
I think some of that
Jobs.
money went to the network board as
Yep.
well, and shared with the downtown group for getting into some of the different magazines.
Yes. Yeah. But it's really focused on the digital advertising now, or the website.
Any other questions?
Yeah, the $6,000 reduction in dues, did I miss a discussion about that?
Oh, so that was what I was talking about with the counties now paying for our membership to McEd, which is wonderful.
Does our county?
It was hard fought, but we got there.
I make a motion
Okay.
that we accept the town manager's proposed budget of $480,100.
Second? All in favor? Opposed?
All right, so the next budget, information technology. And this is where our contract with our IT service provider sits, as well as any budget to replace machines that are at the end of their life, as well as licenses. So a couple of years ago, we converted to Office 365, and that's an annual license. And so that sits in this budget. Other things like printer maintenance, the finance department's license for Trio, which is what we use to do all of our accounting. The monthly streaming for, the live stream, our website hosting, domain hosting, and, anything associated with the website. GIS, our license for Vision, which is our assessing software. All of that sits within the IT budget. And so it's gone up a little bit. Our monthly sort of contract with our service provider is increasing a little bit. But other than that, most everything is kind of remaining pretty flat from last year. A little bit more for, mapping, GIS assessing, and a lot of that just has to do with licensing. John?
Just a question, where are we, because the goal was to overlay the sewer, the roads and everything into a GPS or whatever.
Yes.
How are we doing with that?
It's a great question, and that's one we'll return to when we go to the capital improvement section. But the idea is that for the stormwater network in particular, we don't have a lot of that data, and we need to do the actual field work to get the data. When it comes to the sewer, we're in a pretty good shape in terms of the GIS and the information that we have. The road network, through RSMS, we captured that. And so that's really just maintenance and making sure that we're updating that layer constantly.
If I recall, when it's all said and done, you should be able to just overlay and just go through the...
Yes. Yep. So, and I guess my point is we need to get there with the stormwater infrastructure.
It's only been about 15 years.
Hey, no time like the present.
Right.
So, it's a really good question, though.
Any other questions on information technology?
No, actually, I do. On the licensing streaming, it almost doubles in 4 years. Why is the cost going up so fast?
So that had to do with the conversion to Office 365. And so the idea with that is by transitioning onto Office 365, we can eventually move to all cloud-based data storage. We are transitioning away from some physical servers. So, we're in kind of that awkward period where we have a little bit of both. But that's why that increased so much, because I think the yearly, forget what the yearly cost is of the Office 365 licenses, but I think it's
about 14,000.
Yeah, 14,000.
Okay, motion?
I move that we accept the town manager's proposed budget of $82,280.
Second. All in favor? Motion carries.
May I ask a question?
Yeah.
Is there any income stream from any of this?
From information technology? No, there is not.
I didn't think so, but
I have a question. Is there more than one person across all of this? Is it departmental, or is there one person managing all the IT for?
Yeah, so we have a contract with Harbor Digital, and they do all of the IT across the entire town.
Including streaming services?
Oh, no. They just do all of the sort of day-to-day maintenance of all the computers, everybody's machines.
Is there ever an audit on all of the different software uses and computer uses?
So it was kind of more of like a security audit that was done the year before I got here, but not really on the software itself. And a lot of it, it's difficult. And I think that, there are a few software programs we are kind of getting at a stage where we might want to start looking elsewhere. But like Trio is so specific to local government financial management in Maine. It's very kind of specialized and pretty niche. That being said, we all hate it and have a lot of problems with it. The service is horrible.
It's a love-hate relationship.
Yeah,
with Trio.
I mean, and Jody can speak to this way better than I ever could. I mean, if there was an alternative, I think we'd jump
We
on it
would
in a
love to write
heartbeat.
our own municipal program or software, but there's not enough time in the world to do that.
Yeah, and it's the same with Vision, the assessing software, and the two don't speak to each other, and there's always an issue. So, I mean, we get kind of locked into certain things because what we do is pretty, I mean, even though there's like everybody's covered by a municipality in Maine, you'd be surprised at how few vendors there are for some of this stuff.
Yeah, and I know that Opera House too has their own site as well as ticketing.
Yes, yeah.
All of those things.
So that would be like any sort of domain hosting for like the website, the Opera House website. The Snowball does their own, and then the municipal website. And
Yeah, so Snowball's not included in this, but there's still not one person who can take a big picture, look at what's being used, and possibly reduce or consolidate.
I'd say that's a fair enough. Yeah, that's a fair enough point.
As you've transitioned stuff to cloud and we're halfway in between, are we still have a lot of risk associated with hacking?
We're pretty, I mean, there's always a risk.
Sure.
But I think that because we have that monthly, maintenance contract and a provider that's, pretty aware of that, and also the going to Office 365 has been helpful because, that's regularly updated by Microsoft. That's been very, very helpful. And, we haven't had a ransomware attack or anything like that. Unlike other towns. So, I mean, it's always a risk.
Are we holding back things fiscally? Are we doing things slowly fiscally that increase that risk, or not necessarily?
I wouldn't say that we are. Yeah.
Okay. Move on.
Did you have a question, Mark?
You're up. No,
Oh, I'm sorry.
scratching.
Insurance.
All right, so insurances are the next area. So this is increased a little bit over last year. A lot of that just has to do with, the premium is set at our loss rates for both it's called general liability here, but it's really all the property and casualty. When we were with MMA, they sort of broke it up by each individual category, and we transitioned from MMA to the Allen Agency is our broker, and Trident is our insurance provider. And so, the premiums increased a little bit because of losses. For workers' compensation, it's held pretty steady over the past few years. We've still got a few old claims that are going to fall off within the next year or so. So we should see our premium decrease. And on the revenue side of things, we're seeing a dividend payout. So it's about $30,000 that we're anticipating. So that's kind of the overall insurance picture.
I noticed the major increase of $10,000 in the unemployment insurance line.
Yeah, that rate is set by Maine Municipal Association. That's who we go through for unemployment insurance. And I believe that rate readjustment was a legislative change and a change to their program.
I just tell you as much.
I'd like to thank whoever is responsible for workers' comp going. Is it our stellar employees or?
I'd say that's a great point. I'm glad you brought that up. So that's something that we have a safety committee, and they meet monthly, and they do a really good job in just creating a good safety culture within the town, making sure that any sort of incidents that could occur, like if it's a winter, making everybody diligent about slips, trips, and falls. You'll see people walking, like our custodian walks around with cleats on his boots around the building. They've just done a great job in instilling a safety culture in the town, and that wasn't always the case. So that's been very helpful in reducing losses. And also, the Allen Agency, we were at risk of not having any workers' comp insurance if you look back in, 17, 18, and they came in and found a way to make sure that we were covered. So that's been a really great relationship.
Wait, I didn't understand, why did it jump so much? 10,000, I mean, that's a big jump.
Oh, so for the unemployment insurance, that rate is set by Maine Municipal Association.
So it's not based on our number of employees or anything, it just, and we've had a great record and they still,
Yes, so for unemployment, I believe it was a legislative change in their program.
okay.
Was changed, so that's why
Everybody
that.
got hit.
Yes, correct. Yep. Yeah, the thing that we have most control over, the general liability and the workers' comp, by making sure that we're diligent about trying to control our losses.
I don't know, what is it's the mod rate, right?
Yes.
What is that currently?
Oh, goodness.
Oh, you have that?
Well,
I'm impressed with you.
I try and anticipate the question,
Yeah,
so I
so
can find it.
workers' comp, it's a combination of the payroll and our mod rate. Were you
Was it
asking about workers'
unemployment?
What
comp?
the rate was. What do
For
you guys-
unemployment?
No, for workers' comp.
Oh, I don't have that, and I think it varies with each department and the risk that's involved.
It's clerical is less than the snow.
Yeah, clerical, then you have,
Yeah.
You don't do like an overall company or municipal average or anything like that?
So what they do is they break it down by, sort of the different types of jobs. Like, a clerical job would have a certain rate, and then somebody who works in public works would have another. And so they identify all those jobs, they have our entire payroll, and then that's how they come up with the overall. And I can give you all that if you're interested.
We're talking about a rate that you reportable injuries, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So you must have one rate for everybody though.
well, no, it's actually, it's streets, it's drivers.
We're like a weird
Yeah,
business.
firefighters, police, it's all broken down, and then it's assigned a code, and then it's assigned a rate.
Okay.
So is the Snowball incorporated in this, or is that?
They are. Yep.
They are.
Yes. Yep. And one thing that the select board has changed is that it used to be that, the Snowball was included in this, and there was no reimbursement from the Snowball for any portion of the workers' compensation insurance, but the select board's changed that so that Snowball does reimburse the town to some extent, just so we're able to get a better picture of, or more, it's not exactly accurate because it's hard to break out, but.
And they give it all away.
Till they run out of money, then we reimburse them.
A lot of one hand to the other.
Any other questions or motion?
I'd move we accept the town manager's proposed budget of $238,200.
Okay. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. To tab 9.
We only owe $6 on a truck.
Yes.
That says $21 on another one.
Are we down, so we're down in debt, I don't have tab numbers, so.
What it says page 35.
So,
I think you're looking at,
that's the payment,
You
that's,
said page 35 on your, and your
are
debit.
you looking at the principal or the interest?
that's interest that we would owe on the first year loan.
I'll give you $6 if you want, I'll get rid of it.
All right. So, yes, the debt service.
Page 34, 35.
34 as well.
So for debt service, these are all of the payments on equipment or projects that we're currently committed to paying to until the debt is retired. So we did have a little bit of debt retired this year for equipment over last year. We did have a few other things that have come on for the first payment for this year. Most notable would be the interfund borrowing, and anybody who was on the budget committee last year probably remembers the discussions around that. So that was Pearl Street and West Dam. Both of those projects were budgeted to be about 300. So I think Pearl Street's a $360,000 project, and the West Dam was about a $300,000 project. And so this would be the first year of a 10-year repayment to the town's surplus or the town's unassigned fund balance for those particular projects. So the West Dam, that came in under budget, fortunately. So it's a smaller repayment than we anticipated. So the other new debt would be new capital projects that are going to be, we'll talk about those in the CIP section. But overall, if you look at the interest side, because we've retired some debt, the overall, interest payments are reducing, and then debt's, increasing 4.9% overall because of those payments that I was just explaining. So any questions about debt at all?
The Seabright Dam,
Yes.
what is that?
So that was 2 years ago. We needed to make some significant structural repairs. Yep, and the powerhouse as well.
And we didn't need to pay for any of that in 19?
No, because of the way that it was financed.
Are any of these projected out beyond into 22, 23?
Yes, so if you want sort of a full picture of what the town's debt looks like, there's a spreadsheet included in your packets. And that has, every single loan, bond, lease purchase that the town has, and, the yearly repayments for each and how long that debt's on. So, this kind of comes back, we talked about this a little at the first meeting. In 23 and then again in 25, those are key years because we're retiring some pretty significant debt. So the idea is this year and next year, those are really good years to plan for some major capital projects. So when we get to 23 and 25, we're prepared. We've got engineering work done, we've got planning done so that we can just sort of move forward with, securing the funding and financing and then bidding projects out. John?
Hardin Avenue is already paid for?
Hardin, that's
that big ditch we put in all the way down Hardin Avenue between Hardin Avenue and Rockwood Drive. That's already paid for?
Yeah, you'd know better than I did. I think that was before.
But I don't see it. I mean, that was a $200,000 project. Hardin Avenue, when we did that, Pat was still here when we did that, so it'd be...
I think that was part of that combined bond, that
It was. That's why I was
500,000.
trying to find it, because it's...
So that's lumped into that. What's it called?
That and three things got put together.
Yeah, there was the sewer line that didn't end up getting done, so they did all kinds of other
The
sewer.
fire truck, the plow truck that didn't get bought too.
What was that in that?
I think so. It was a mess.
It's a general obligation bond is what it's going to be under. It's a 2000 miscellaneous project.
So the one at the top?
Oh, the
4019?
The clock.
Yeah, for the $50,000 payment for FY21, that's the general obligation bond.
So how much is left on that bond?
We have $350,000.
I thought it was expensive. I remember it was expensive. So most of that 300, the project, or is that some other stuff? I can't remember how it broke down now. It's
There was
been a
like
while.
5 different
I know it
things.
wasn't good.
It was the clock, the
Clock, the 75,000 we put in. for the
sewer
clock.
line under Bakery Bridge, even though that ended up being allocated to other sewer projects because that got done when the
Yeah, the
bridge.
$100,000 to go under for the bridge.
Yeah.
Our cost for demolishing the bridge.
Yeah.
Yep, and then there was, so the Hardin Avenue sewer line replacement, Inner Harbor floats, the town clock, and also the air compressor for the Snowball, which the Snowball pays that
Yeah,
portion of the.
and I see the floats are down here at the bottom. Is that another bond?
So the You mean in
I
the
saw
capital,
float.
the capital improvement
I thought I
plan?
saw a float line, maybe I didn't.
No, you would have. So
23,000, that's a different set of floats?
there's a number of floats we're replacing.
No, but there's already a bond payment for, or at least a debt payment in here for finger floats for this year for $23,552.
That's the polystyrene.
But is that the small floats to the left?
The dinghy floats.
I think the floats that we did originally were the big ones in front of the schooners. And this is a different project you did after that. So I'm just trying to remember.
Because it all has to be done by 25.
Right.
Yeah, so we spent 50,000 last year on float replacement, and that will be the floats. Oh my
Dinghy
gosh.
floats.
No, not the dinghy floats, the main,
Oh, in front of Harbor Park where the other boats are?
no, right as you,
The small boats.
The Harbor
smaller
Master
boats,
Shack.
yeah, those floats.
Oh.
Because, the unencapsulated polystyrene.
So it was underneath.
Do you remember when the town
Underneath
passed
was
that?
redone.
Yeah, I know.
So there's that.
I agree to
And then this year, it's going to be the the floats for the transient boats that will be replaced.
So the fees for the leases or whatever out there, was supposed to cover the replacement of the floats, the people that are using the floats. Because I don't have a boat, I don't care, so they need to pay.
I will say-
I had to pay to rebuild my float last year.
I'd say the harbor committee and the select board have been increasing harbor fees, and, we are using, to offset the cost of that, so. Of the float replacement.
But this number really, you gotta vote for it anyway, because this is all approved by town meeting votes, so, right? So
Well,
it's-
no, you do get a choice over the 50,000 that's allocated this year for harbor float replacement under the capital improvement plan.
This is already, right here is already.
Yes. Yep, everything we're talking about now, we've already obligated ourselves to it.
So we need a motion for 622-842.
so moved.
I have a question, I'm sorry.
Yep.
I'm wondering, I'm trying to understand, why do we borrow $7,000 for a copier over 3 years? What's the rationale for those very small loans where we have reserves and we could pay straight cash and not pay I mean, it's a decent interest rate, but what's the rationale?
A lot of it is like a lease agreement that you have with a company and the servicing that comes with that agreement.
Okay. Is that the case for trucks and for all those, I would say lower than $100,000 is a bunch of.
So I guess a good example, like the police cruisers, we don't finance the purchase of a police cruiser, we'll just pay it outright.
You pay it outright?
Yep.
And then you pay the maintenance on it?
Yes, yep.
But we pay maintenance in the lease.
Could you say again real quick what it was about Pearl Street?
Oh, yes, so that Pearl Street project, last year, the Budget Committee voted to take $360,000 out of the surplus or the unassigned fund balance, either or. And the idea is over a 10-year period, we're going to pay ourselves back $36,000 a year so that we're not completely, just depleting the surplus. We're going to replenish it over time. So we're kind of like treating ourselves as a bank.
Okay, we have a motion for $622,842. Is a second?
Second.
Second. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Reserves.
There would be a recommendation for the interest as well. That was just for the principal, I don't know if you
Oh,
want
for,
to
that was,
officially.
excuse me, correct, so that was, sorry, so that was page 34, so we need a motion for page 35, is what you're saying?
Yes.
For that,
Accept the
thank you.
town manager's recommendation for debt service of 120 $120,153.
Seconded, and all in favor? Opposed?
Do you anticipate any refinancing of any of these things?
Some of them were locked into, like if we went through the bond bank.
Yep.
Some of them we could refinance. We could speak with the banks about refinancing.
Whose decision is that?
I mean, really, that would be, Jody and I could reach out to.
Yeah, go up for sort of a bid.
Yeah.
All right, so on to capital reserves. So I propose that we decrease the amount of money that we sort of put away in reserve accounts. A lot of that has to do with the fact that we have a lot of very healthy reserves. So, for this year, I really wanted to just to hit the budget target of under a 3% increase, really be very conservative about what we put away in reserve accounts. So, we looked really hard at which accounts looked really healthy, which, could use additional funding, and accrued benefits was one where I thought that that would benefit from additional money set aside for that. The fire truck account, that's really at this stage a lot about preventative maintenance and making sure that we have money set aside in case we have a fire truck that needs some sort of maintenance. The parks and open space, we're trying to build that reserve up so that we have, that funding to go to if we want to do sort of a significant park improvement. And Mark can talk to the fact that there are some that are being planned right now.
Yes, on the Parks and Rec, they're looking at redoing some at Shirt Tail Point, Shirt Tail Park, or whatever it's called, and also at the Lake Beach. There's some renovations that need to be done there that need to be more than just a maintenance thing. So,
yeah, so that's the kind of thing that this reserve could potentially be used for. So the snowball reserve, really that's just trying to be prepared in case we have a bad year because of weather, or there could be a piece of equipment that unexpectedly needs to be repaired. Just having some funding set aside to be able to make those kinds of investments in the snowball. Dams, that funding is just sort of in recognition of the fact that our dams are sort of at the end of their life. There's repairs that are unanticipated that happen all the time, as well as other work that we might want to do. It could be having these funds available because we'd like to use it as match for a grant, and we do have a few grants to look at our dams a little more closely now. So having that funding available has been really helpful for the town. So that's why I'm proposing we continue to put money in that reserve account. Harbor dredging, we consistently try to put about $20,000 a year in those accounts so that we're building that up. So when it comes to the point where we need to dredge the harbor, we have that funding available. The public landing, we're going to get to a point pretty soon. There was a report done, it was called the Penn Bay Resiliency Project. They looked at 10 communities in Penobscot Bay, Camden being one of them, and our infrastructure's vulnerability to sea level rise. And we're going to have to make some significant investment in the public landing to the tune of about $6 million. And $20,000 a year isn't going to cover that, of course, but we need to, next year is going to be the year that we need to start making some serious investment in the engineering and the planning that needs to go into that eventual investment to, upgrade the public landing. So that's kind of, having this money set aside for that purpose, I think will reduce the cost of, the engineering that needs to be done next year. So this was a conversation that we'll be having, with all of those who are going to be on the committee next year, is, some real, serious investment in engineering and design work for the public landing.
What do you do for $6 million?
You should read that report.
Raise it up?
Oh, yeah.
It's preliminary.
So we gotta fix the deck for now? I mean, we're talking 20 years from now, we're gonna raise it up. Meanwhile, somebody could kill himself walking on that deck down there.
Point taken, we should be
We
maintaining
should at
that
least
deck.
be doing the maintenance on it until we make a decision.
Yes.
And that deck's been deferred now for 5 years or more.
Right.
And we've talked about putting a railing on it. We did put some lights on with the benefit of Tyler and his father, which was nice. But we need to do some upgrades.
Oh, yeah, I mean, there's
trip hazard.
serious upgrades that need to happen there.
Right, I mean,
For a long time.
yeah, for too long. Can I ask a question back?
Sure, yeah.
The 40,000 you took out of the cemetery line,
Yes.
where's the money that Parker gave for his maintenance of where him and Rainey are laid to rest? There was $90,000 worth of Camden National Bank stock given to the town for maintenance of that circular area, the gardens, forever. So is that money separate from the money that we're talking about? You said 125,000.
Yep.
All of a sudden they've got. Where did that come from?
Where did what come
The
from?
125 that they supposedly got. I heard you say 125 last week.
That's the amount of money there, that's the income from the endowment.
Which endowment is that?
We have two. First, we have the Oak Hill and we have the Mountain View. Let me just get to that.
This Bank Mountain Street needs so much work. The trees need to be cut, there's so many stones that are laid over it.
Yeah,
And
and I
then they need
actually,
cleaned.
I
And
met
We're way
with,
behind on the projects, but they were supposed to do a third of that every year in cleaning, and that hasn't been done every 5
You
years.
should go to a cemetery committee meeting.
yeah, we
Pardon?
met with them in January. And they're aware of the income from these two trust funds, endowment funds. And
Because one of them
they-
is dedicated to just that circle up on Oak
The
Hill.
Irene Late
Right.
Trust, yes, and that's completely separate.
And then it should be some money from Ken Dickey, or did that get spent?
Yep, yep, but that's all been straightened out, and that's part of the Irene Lake Trust.
Okay, that was like 10 or 20,000, wasn't it? Or more.
I think it was more than 20,000, I'd have to look back.
Yeah. And Parker's was 90,000 worth of stock at that time, which has been a while.
Yes. So for the Mount View, and this is up through November of 2019, I haven't updated their income, sorry, 1 second. Can we have some music while I...
John, while she's looking at it, did you say something about $40,000 we taken out?
Well, they're not putting 40,000 into their reserve this year.
No.
Okay, so-
Huh?
Where are you seeing that?
It was also under this thing last week when she had it up there. And it says 40, there was 40 for last year, right? And there isn't one for this year.
40,000 was for the library.
Cemetery Reserve, 4501.
It's 5,000, not 40.
5,000, maybe I'm not
That's
the line.
5,000.
That's Barking.
Yeah, that's 5,000.
Oh, wait a minute. These little, you need a ruler, right?
Bring utensils.
Yeah. But anyway, I remember you had the 40 plus that you were not going to put in. That's why I was asking the question about, because I knew these other monies were there.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so just want to make sure they didn't get.
Mark, did you have a question?
Yeah, totally off of that subject. Your line 4221 and 4250, the streets and sidewalks and the Washington Street sidewalk, the town manager part has eliminated anything on there. Going on the fact that the last times and the current projects that we have right now that are out to bid have come in so drastically above the bids or above the budgeted amounts, why are we eliminating money for sidewalks when there's a lot of work that needs to be done on them, and
So it's not overall eliminating money for work on sidewalks, it's that particular project with MDOT. And frankly, I don't know what the bid is going to come in for that project. So I mean, I couldn't put a number in there and defend it to this budget committee because I just do not know what the bid for, the last number that we've gotten on an estimate for that project was from maybe 3 to 5 years ago. So
if we have something in that line, $5,000 or something of that nature,
well, we've
at
already,
least something that's in there.
no, we've already got $60,000 if you look through it.
Sitting there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Another thing is we'll never live long enough for the state to pay for that.
Yeah.
You know,
So,
it's not very optimistic of you, John.
it's been going on for 35 years now.
Carla?
You have 10 reserve accounts itemized here, or is this the totality of the reserve accounts, or are there other ones?
There's a lot of other reserve accounts. So the ones here are just the ones that we're proposing to put additional funds in for this year. But if you'd like, a list of all the reserves and the amounts that are available in them, Jody has that, and I can give it to everybody.
That would be helpful.
Can you talk to a couple items that are where you differ from the department head, like the storm drain?
Yeah, so a lot of that came down to, we have operational funding for storm drain repairs, and, we've already got a pretty healthy reserve. And a lot of, with the department heads, they're just trying to be diligent in making sure that we put money away year after year. But because I get to see what the total amount is and know what's pretty healthy and what isn't, I looked at like the storm drain account, for example, and said that, that's, the balance is at an area where if we did have an emergency, we would be able to, have funding available to cover off on it. So that's, that's a good example of one where, I just didn't think it was necessary to put.
that would be
more money.
definitely a good idea to have that to compare to. What are we adding to?
Yep. I can.
Then,
Absolutely.
we're asking for 40,000 or 5,000, but what's already there? Is there nothing there, or is there $1 million already there?
Well, that's itemized below, but that's just for the ones that they're asking for money for. All the ones they're not asking for money for, we don't see. Like in the verbiage below, it shows you what the fund balance is, the reserve balance.
A question about the snowball reserve.
Sure.
I'm just not clear about the language here. The town ceased funding this reserve in lieu of debt service. What does that mean?
So back when the redevelopment happened and the town voted to, pay for the redevelopment, that's when, and I apologize, this is a little before my time, so all I know is like from looking back through the notes. When that happened, I think that the budget committee and the select board at the time made the decision that since we're going to be paying the debt service on the redevelopment, that we're not going to have a reserve account for the snow bowl that we fund on a yearly basis.
But we're still paying the debt service today.
Yes.
So that's not changed.
That has not changed.
And the other issue is that I'm not a scientist, I'm not a meteorologist, but I think weather's changing, and I don't think we can anticipate that there won't be future operational expenses at the snow bowl. So why do we have to set aside a fund balance for that?
Well, that's kind of the idea, is that if we have a bad winter because the weather's bad, we have a reserve account that we can sort of offset.
What you're proposing, $25,000, which is double what's in there now. I mean, it's exactly what's in there now.
That's what we used to always be, though.
Yeah, I know,
Every
it
year.
seems like a big number to me.
But the other thing that changed that too, they did so well on the toboggan weekends. They had some pretty good years. So we didn't feel they needed the 25,000 because when they were doing $80,000, $90,000 worth of revenues at one time.
But you know that was, in years past, it was a toboggan championship that really saved the snow bowl.
Well, I know, but this was used for, like Audra said, for the big ticket things like, I remember one year we had a bull wheel come up, we had that plus some other stuff. I mean, that was $59,000 for one repair, so.
Yeah, I mean, just, servicing the groomer is $30,000.
That's nothing, I know.
Yes.
We have anything in the tree conservation that covers this brown station?
So that account was originally created with and it was kind of broad, the way that it was defined, but it was sort of created with the Emerald Ash Borer in mind. However, the select board does have the flexibility to spend it on a number of different, tree-related issues.
Is there anything being done now to kind of help with that issue? 'Cause I live on the river and it's awful.
Yeah, I mean, we had a workshop about it last night. The state entomologist came in and presented, just about it and talked about some options. In Barrett's Cove, I guess at the end of the day, it comes down to private property owners making a decision as to how they want to manage it on their properties. With the town land where it's a problem, like in Barrett's Cove, we're gonna work with a arborist on some mechanical pruning and injections on trees where that's not an option. But really, that's kind of the long and short of the entomologist presentation last night. Is really it's the mechanical pruning, and if you can't get to the areas because they're inaccessible, injections are an option. And I know I feel bad saying it again, but I know it's like a huge irritant and people want us to look at like an aerial spraying program, but it's really ineffective and given sort of the risks to human health and the environment, I think that's a real bad road for us to go down.
But nothing came up that the treatment of the area around the trees or anything like that, and specifically.
Well, the injections.
So nothing,
Yeah.
nothing can be done to affect the moth, other than treating the tree specifically.
Yes, yeah. They did talk about like things that cause population collapse, like if you got a wet, cold spring, that tends to create a parasite that kills the caterpillars. And that was something that's happened in the more southern mid-coast Maine communities like Harpswell, Freeport, Yarmouth. Unfortunately, because we're sort of on the upper edge of the infestation, it didn't happen here.
Actually, it did happen. Camden did have some of the fungus last year. It did help kill some of the moths. So the fungus is here in Camden, not the whole town, but there is part of it. So, if we have a wet spring, it'll make a difference. And I'll just add one more thing. The reason we started the tree conservation, that was a big part of that, is because when the emerald ash borer hits the ash trees, and it is now in Maine, it's taken some time to move. The estimates, it'll cost about $250,000, either in taking down the trees it kills or injecting the trees. It's pretty much the same cost either way, or injecting the trees to save some of the iconic trees in town. It's a very expensive project, so that's why we started this fund.
Well, won't the moth, if it defoliates for like 2 seasons in a row, won't it also kill the trees, the brown-tail moth?
Yes, it can.
Yeah,
So actually, if it does a number of years in a row, but if the scientist last night from the state said when the moths defoliate a tree, they tend to move on from it, and 1 year of defoliation will not kill a tree. It'll come back. So it's not as bad for the trees unless it's so overwhelming that they have no other trees to go to, but they will move on and not kill the tree.
So there is potential for use of that funds if any of the trees around the park are affected.
Yes.
Or moths as well.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
Do you know what the name of the injection was? Because there's definitely someone I know you can get it personally and do it in trees. I just don't know if you said what the brand was.
Is it BTM?
What's the question?
Courtney was asking about the name of the pesticide.
Actually, last night, which was video streamed, he listed those on the presentation he had. Get it there. They're kind of chemical names that I don't remember.
Right.
But they're listed on the presentation. We can get that to you. If anybody wants it. I'll try to get it. So check the live stream to see it.
Okay, any other questions on capital reserves, equipment, and facilities? Yes?
So I was just looking through this, and this may be going to the Public Works commentary, which is a couple nights from now or a couple weeks from now, but out of your decreasing in your recommendations, the street and sidewalks budget's pretty much across the board. What's kind of your thinking there? Feels like they're getting worse, but.
So that's kind of, you know, how we talked about sort of a multi-year strategy. So this year would be focused on doing a lot of that, you know, major engineering and planning for when debt retires in '23. And so when we get to the capital improvements, and I'd actually like to stop before we get there tonight because my new Public Works Director's got a really exciting presentation for all of you, and he'd be really upset if we talk about it without him. But yeah, the idea is that we would, you know, we're going to be talking about budgeting $200,000 this year just to do, you know, engineering and design work in anticipation of doing like a major road and street improvement bond in a couple of years.
And that's 2 years away. I mean, I guess I'll wait till the presentation.
Yeah.
It seems like we should be upping that reserves and all that stuff for the streets, at least for the next 2 years, in my opinion.
I mean,
And then,
that's certainly an option, but I would say I think that the scope of repairs that we need to do is so significant that kind of chipping away at it with 10,000 here, 10,000 there isn't gonna cut it. We're gonna need to do something more aggressive, and a good way to do it without having a significant impact on property taxes is to kind of wait until we retire some debt. And given the construction market and the way that it is and how long it takes us to get ready with engineering work anyway, it's going to take us about that long to do all that work, bid everything out, and then, you know, be ready to go and mobilize for a construction project. So I think that, but like you said, we can talk about it more in
I guess the
detail.
last comment, do you feel like you could maintain at least the current status of the roads with a reduction in the budget?
Yes, I mean, this is a reserve account anyway, so, you know, from
Well, yeah,
year to year.
Across the board, though, it looks like it's all being reduced. Is that right?
Just the reserves.
Oh, it was? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So that made us money in for fixing sidewalks?
Yes, absolutely, under the highway budget.
Because in your discussion the other day, you were talking more of major projects with under drains and all that with the streets and stuff, which would be sidewalks with a new project. I think the concern is we have a lot of in-place sidewalks that need to be fixed because they're really bad. And then I know we're waiting for DOT on Mountain Street because we temporarily fixed that because that was really bad.
Right.
So it's Main Street. So it's Main Street.
Right. So does David now have a list of, like, the roads for the sidewalks that need to be repaired versus the new?
He does, and, you know, that pedestrian safety forum that we had, that's more of helping with the prioritization, because we know what we have and where it is and roughly what the condition is, but there's just so much, and it can't all be done at once, so we need to really kind of zero in on what the priorities are.
We haven't done it at all for a number of years.
Mhm.
It's not just you, it's everybody. I mean, it's been going on for a long time.
Yes.
Unfortunately, this seems to be one of the things that gets kicked down the road because of funding and keeping the budget, you know, in line. And, but I see we added $30,000 for the river.
Yes. Yep, so do we want to talk, because I don't think we've talked about those yet. So the last one we talked about was the public landing, and the next one, the Riverwalk. So that's that $5,000, that's more opportunistic. We've really tried to seek grants for that project. So the idea is if we, a little bit at a time, put some money away in a reserve account, eventually we're going to have, you know, funds to be able to match grant opportunities. So there's the Recreation Trails Program is where we've gone in the past to access grants, but that's a 50-50 match. So we need to be able to have funding available for that.
So what I see that would be very beneficial for us is if we had a breakdown of all the reserve accounts and the balances, because this is really unclear. You know, you're saying you want to add to the reserves, but without knowing what the reserve is.
It's down below.
It's each,
Well,
each item, but I've got a.
It's just the ones you're adding to.
Right.
Okay, so it would make it clear if we knew the reserve we're not adding to had plenty of money in it, so we understand that.
Yes.
I'll be emailing that out to to Robin so that she can read it out to the.
All right, so the next one, tree conservation, we discussed that already.
So we got money set aside for tree pruning, because that has been getting,
Yes, that's in a different, that's in the
'cause
operational
that's-
budget.
right.
Yeah. And then the final one, the river habitat restoration. That's another area where having, matching funds available for grants has been, really valuable to the town. So we just want to continue to have that funding available should a grant opportunity come our way.
And the only amount in that now is the 30,000 we put in last year,
Yes.
correct?
Yep.
And none of that has been touched or has been dedicated to a grant?
It hasn't to date, but it will, the select board has given approval to use it as matching funds
So
for.
after grants? Okay.
Well, no, to current grants that we have.
Okay,
Yep.
so some of that is committed.
Yes, yeah. Not for this year that we're budgeting, but the current amount
The
that's in
stuff,
the
the
reserve.
30,000 that's already in there,
Yes,
how much of that is committed?
30,000 is.
All of it, all of
Yes.
it's.
so it's basically zero.
Yes,
So it's balancing
Yep.
zero, not 30,000.
yes, but it hasn't been spent yet, so we're still going to report it as 30.
Okay.
Audra, with the $250,000 thought of the ash borer, putting 5,000 in, is that enough?
I mean, last year, the budget committee said the same thing, and they put it up to 10,000. So, yeah, I would absolutely make the comment that 5,000 a year, depending on how fast it moves, might not be enough to have us ready with the full amount, when there is an infestation.
We're not limited to using an ash borer.
Yeah, but it should be both, like she brought up with
Tree conservation, period.
Yeah.
the
You gotta kind
brown
of,
tail.
you gotta kind of hit the thing that hits you in the side of the head first. And that could be anything.
Yeah, but when it hits you in the side of the head, it's gonna be too late.
Yeah, good point. Right, but it could be, 5, 10,000, whatever.
But it wouldn't hurt to have money put aside for the folks that can't afford to have, especially these moths, because they're really getting me bad.
So would you like to propose a motion?
I think that ought to be a $20,000 line, period. Then, because have it available for folks that need help with this brown tail, because the town needs to make a commitment.
These funds are, as I recall, indicated to use for town trees, not private property.
Right.
Yeah, but sometimes it doesn't hurt to be able to help them.
That's a decision has to be made.
Right. But if you don't have the money in there, you can't make the decision.
Chicken and egg.
Right.
If it was increased to 20, where would that money come from?
Just sit there and use the ash borer or whatever down the road, right?
Did you ask where would it come from? Property taxes.
Property taxes.
If we're gonna take 30,000 for the river, why can't we put 20,000 from I got into those brown tails last year, it was no fun. I spent almost all summer getting over it. I know. I know a lot of people that got into them last year.
Hey, you're the budget committee, you can recommend.
Carla?
Can we table the vote on this until we see the total reserve, the whole picture of the reserve balances, and we know where the money is? And
Absolutely.
Second that.
Is that a motion?
I propose, I move.
All in favor?
And can I also request that we table the capital improvements discussion?
Motion to table capital improvements? All in favor?
Yeah. That's what they said.
Do we have a motion to adjourn?
No, they
All in favor? Okay, meeting adjourned.